This is the Clutch Picks Sports Betting Podcast, NFL Picks Divisional Round Edition. We are here. It's the playoffs. We survived Super Wildcard Weekend, scrapped, clawed, all that fun stuff. Came out on the other end with a 3-3 week. We'll discuss. The 3-3 week in the Sheldon Says picks brings the totals all year to 139, 132, and 7. We're clawing. We're scrapping. Trying to finish the season strong with a nice run here in the playoffs. And of course, I'm joined by my guy, the man, the myth, the legend, man who is handing out just like prop picks left, right, and center, anytime touchdowns, and all types of stuff. Just winners.
Yeah.
Straight winners.
Oh.
My guy, Mr. Matt Russell. How are you doing?
Good, man.
How super are you feeling?
Yeah, that wasn't really all that super. Wild card weekend, or from a football perspective. Mm-hmm. We had one game that was close in the second half, and it featured 0 touchdowns. It's like if you had told me you're gonna have 5 blowouts and a touchdown-free second half in Detroit between the Rams and the Lions, I'd be like, okay, we got to bump this down from super to just regular wild card here pretty darn quick. But from a betting perspective, it certainly was pretty good. A different route to 3-3 from sort of a best bets perspective. I had a total in there that won, a couple of sides that I felt like probably could have gone a little bit better based on late game tomfoolery and hijinks. But you never know how the profit is going to kind of come in, right? You never know how you're going to win. You just kind of shouldn't say no, but you kind of hope that you are. And this super wild card weekend, the 20, does we count it 2023 or 2024? I never really know. Was known for the long shot anytime touchdowns. It started with Brevin Jordan in the first game. Then we kind of went double long shot touchdowns with Dawson Knox and Calvin Austin, which was kind of a super random one that ended up at certain places it's like 25-1. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting there with like an 18-1 ticket, not even getting the best of the number on Calvin Austin to score a touchdown. So you just never know, right? Like you can split the props, you can split I think we were a little bit ahead on the other props, but you can split all this other stuff. You can even take a small loss on some of this other stuff, and then the rando guys scoring touchdowns is the thing that makes it a profitable weekend. So, that's the fun part about the NFL, right? Where you get with 6 games now down to 4 games, and of course 2 games next week, you get to really dig deep into kind of finding the quote unquote value on some of these guys who get those opportunities or on the field near the goal line or who can break a long touchdown and hopefully come out, getting a little lucky, and then, you have the guys like Kate Otten, who, another long shot touchdown. I know some people had, a lot kind of riding. I had one gentleman tweet me that he had a $10 7 touchdown parlay that the first 6, including Dawson Knox in that first game on Monday, cash. And I don't know if he cashed out. I think they offered, $2 or $3 grand on the cash out. His overall win would have been, I think, 13,000 if Kate Otten scores a touchdown. First drive down the field. I haven't call him wide open necessarily, but he was pretty open. Hit him in the hands in the end zone. And Kate Otten, who then, by the way, gets all the catches for all the yards the rest of the game. So it wasn't like he was just on the field for that one play. Drops the ball, and so I haven't done a wellness check on my guy there who had his 7 touchdown parlay potentially blown up. So hopefully he cashed out or cashed out for a little bit. But that's the kind of craziness that happens on Wild Card Weekend, even if the games aren't necessarily all that great.
Oh, yeah. You talk about long shot bets here. I wonder what the long shot number would have been for Mike McCarthy maintaining his job still at this point.
That's a valid.
Right.
I felt like I dreamed that. I was like, I woke up today and was like, I got to double check to make sure that's a thing that actually happened, because that kind of came down around, bedtime adjacent last night. And I was like, there's a real possibility I just flat out dreamed it, especially this time of year. But no, apparently it's the case. So.
Right. We're the odds makers for that one there. Good old Jerry, man. You just never know what Jerry's thinking.
Well, you see breaking news, and then you see a photo of Mike McCarthy, and I've got the wait what or wait why tweet like ready to go, right? I'm like then I'm like reading the actual tweet. And it's like, wait, what? He's staying? It went from why to what in that case, right?
Yeah.
How? Unbelievable stuff.
Super interesting stuff from coaching malpractice. I guess we'll get to coaching that we hope will be really good in the next round, or, we'll leave that up for debate. But we start on Saturday. We got the Texans at the Ravens. Ravens, 9-point favorites, obviously coming off the bye. To me, I'm looking at this one. I want to know what the weather is going to be, but as long as it's not like super cold, snow, all that fun stuff, I like the Texans here to cover this big number. It's 9 points is a lot. CJ Stroud obviously is balling. We've seen it now for multiple weeks in a row. Their offense, I really love their offensive game plan that they came out with against the Cleveland Browns last week. But I also think for Lamar and the Ravens, there's so much talk each and every year about the bye and what to do, and do they play in the final week and maintaining a rhythm. I think that stuff matters. And if you hear them talk about that ahead of time, and then now you're talking about 2 weeks off, I don't know. I feel like Lamar and that offense might be a rhythm type thing, and 2 weeks off is a long time to be trying to go toe to toe against this offense, which is firing on all cylinders. Give me the Texans. I'll take all those points. If you want to give me more points up to 10, I'll gladly take that as well.
Right.
But at 9, I just like the points because I think, the Texans can put up points with them. And we've seen too many instances where all of a sudden Lamar and that offense just stalls for whatever reason, one reason or another. And having 2 weeks off would just be a great excuse for them to do that again.
Yeah. So, I understand the concerns with Lamar. Let's kind of start there. And this game's interesting because you have, of the 4 games this weekend, you have 3 rematches. We didn't have a ton of rematches last week, which was cool for the wild card because, you get a lot of divisional type games sometimes in that situation. This week we have 3 rematches, but none of them are really kind of, definitively relevant to these games, right? You've got obviously a location change with Kansas City, Buffalo, a location change with Tampa Bay and Detroit. And this is a rematch from week 1, which is CJ Stroud's first game ever, right? And so it's easy to look back and be like, oh, well, like Houston had only 3.7 yards per play in that game, which is basically like incredibly low. They get blown out pretty convincingly and just kind of go like, okay, that, you can either sort of take that probably a little bit too seriously, but I also don't think you can just blow it out entirely too, right? A couple of different reasons. Now let's start on the offensive side here. And you mentioned, the Lamar thing. And I think that's I kind of think that's the most important part here because, when you get into kind of hot button players like Lamar, you go, okay, well, how does he do in the playoffs, right? And I just don't think it's really all that fair to equate Lamar's playoffs this year with the 2020 season, right? Like mid-pandemic season. And he's been injured the last couple of seasons, right? And so, okay, like that wasn't ideal for the Ravens, but there's also no, playoff. I mean, they made the playoffs, but from a Lamar Jackson standpoint, there was no sort of playoff results that you can go off of. So we're going all the way back to, in that 2020 season, Lamar got hurt against Buffalo, you'll remember, in the divisional round. They had beaten the Titans in the wild card round. So going back to like a pure Lamar Jackson sort of failure in the playoffs, outside of obviously being injured, which I don't think we can qualify as a failure necessarily, especially predictive to this game, you got to go back to 2019. Now we're going back like pre-pandemic to when they lost to the Titans, right? And of course, we just watched Mike Vrabel get fired here in the last couple of weeks, and then everybody go to Vrabel's defense in how great of a coach he was. And so, which is, I don't disagree. Obviously, we talk about Vrabel on a regular basis here. So it's like, we're going to beat up Lamar Jackson because he got beat by the Chargers, a veteran Chargers team, in the first round of the playoffs in his rookie year. And because he got beat by Derrick Henry running over a Ravens defense that wasn't feeling anything when it had to do with Derrick Henry, right? And then that, you'll remember that game, right? The Titans had this big lead, and it was up to Lamar Jackson in his second season, obviously an MVP year, but to throw, which at that time, and not even really at this time, was his game. So it's like, I don't think you can really take any of those 3 playoff games in which you went 1-2 making it through. I don't think you can take those games and necessarily extrapolate that to this season, which is yet another MVP season for Lamar, more sort of, throwing oriented this season, different offensive coordinator where you get off of like the Greg Roman train and you've been on, the Todd Monken train, former Georgia offensive coordinator, and obviously like a way better receiving cast. He's looking, it seems like he's going to get Mark Andrews back for this game. Obviously Beckham, Flowers, guys who weren't around back then. And a running game that's been really efficient this season as well, right? One of the, sort of better ones in the game. So like, it's not night and day, but it's certainly like dusk versus middle of the night when it comes to like how much better the Ravens offense should be. And, you mentioned the concept of rhythm, right? And there used to be this old sort of bowl, college football bowl game theory, right? Where if you had kind of an air raid offense that was based on rhythm and tempo, and they had that 3 weeks off, they would fall out of rhythm, and they were a good bet against in college football. That's not what this offense is, right? Like this is a lot of Lamar Jackson, improvisational passing offense. And like I said, a really good run game where, from a, long run type standpoint, right? An explosiveness standpoint, you'd love it if Keaton Mitchell was still around, but like they can still do enough on the run, with their sort of kind of, harder, sort of shorter yardage. You're not going to get a ton of like explosive runs, but you're going to get sort of consistent ground game against this Texans team that the Browns weren't able to do, because the Browns, it's just Joe Flacco handing off to essentially replacement level running backs, right? There was no Nick Chubb, and Flacco's certainly not a threat with his legs. And so, I kind of worry about the Texans defensively here, and I don't worry as much as maybe everybody else kind of does here when it comes to Lamar, because it's just a different situation. Like so much time has passed. You have to ask him to reprove it, but you also can't necessarily judge him by things that have happened so long ago, right? This wasn't, when you say Lamar Jackson playoffs, it's like, and we're not talking about last year. We're not talking about the year before that, right? So I think the Ravens are going to be very good on offense. I think the rest and the health certainly helps. We're talking about a Texans team that this is now third straight game where they've fought for their lives. And watching that game last week, you look at the Texans, at home being able to cook the Browns defense. And you and I have talked about the splits between the Browns being at home versus being on the road, right? At home, you get the scummy conditions in Cleveland, bad offensive conditions. And then you go on the road, especially climate controlled scenario being in a dome, and that defense was vulnerable. Now, we talked about this very first game last week, and it was like, man, I'd really like to bet on the Texans, but like as I write the preview for it, it's just like there's kind of no discernible path other than just kind of, being able to, predict or, sort of kind of, like guess that the Browns defense is going to be as bad as they were. And if you want to tell me that the Ravens defense is going to be that bad, like you can, but like I'm not going to believe it, because they are, they have sort of taken on all comers everywhere at any time, and especially at home, right? And so, even if they had, and they don't, but even if they had sort of super different splits between home and road, the Ravens are at home in this game. And so Stroud being down to one receiver and being able to take it, some reason the Browns not being able to cover Nico Collins in that game, I don't see him beating, the Ravens team deep in like they did in essentially the first or second series with Collins. And I think the Ravens are going to tackle better than the Browns did, who were just kind of unable or unwilling indoors in the warmth to tackle last week. And, and it's a small thing, but like, it's, one of these sort of sliding doors things. You never know what was going to happen necessarily, but like there was a pretty blatant pass interference call that got missed when that game was a 3-point game last week. That everybody was kind of like, okay, like the flag's coming here, and just looking. No, there's no flag. Okay, cool. And that turned, it turned a series from first down, 10 to 15 yards down the field to 2nd and 10. And so obviously your chances of getting a first down are limited. Now the Browns could have gone ahead and gotten that first down. Don't get me wrong. Like it was their fail. No, you can't get a first down off 2nd and 10. Like, come on, get yourself together here. But like up until that point, that game was back and forth, which was a position that the Browns were fine with being in. When that happened and they ended up having to punt, then the Texans get their back and forth. They get their fourth score, in fact, and go down and take a 10-point lead. And now Joe Flacco is in a position where he's down 10 points. And you don't want Joe Flacco with, again, sketchy defensive performance being down 10 points. And of course, then he throws 2 pick sixes and the score piles up, and it's cosmetically a lot different than how we felt about that game at halftime, at the start of the third quarter, et cetera, right? So it's going to artificially make you think that the Texans are, kind of better than maybe they necessarily were, right? Because going into that game, you'll recall, like, they were 2.5 point home underdogs against a Browns team that all season has been rated right around kind of level, right? Like league average. Which means that going into that game, the Texans were rated below average. So, as much as you might say, okay, well, yeah, but they beat the Colts on the road and they won that game, like they're an above average team. We're still talking about a team that's kind of been lurking around average, going on the road to Baltimore, well-rested team, like getting, again, their guys healthy, and an offense that is different than it was a couple of years ago. And so you can look at this game and be like, man, 9 is a lot of points, but it's like, we just watched 5 blowouts this past week, right? If that wasn't a lesson in in sort of refuting the idea that just because it's a playoff game means it has to be close, then I don't know what is. So honestly, I kind of think the Ravens just absolutely blow out the Texans this week. And it's not going to be some, we said this before last week, it's not going to be some super negative against CJ Stroud that he goes on the road against the number 1 seed in the MVP and the top defense. My sort of argument against the idea that Lamar Jackson was the MVP was because the defense was so good. It's like, this is definitively the better side. Both of those sides on the Ravens are definitively better, and they have home field. You mentioned the weather. It's going to be chilly. It's going to be a little windy, right? Like, look outside. It's, anything kind of what north of Florida is in something of a deep freeze, or has been over the last few days. It's supposed to get a little bit better, but like, we're not getting into balmy conditions here at any point in time. I just think it sets up really badly for the Texans here. And yeah, the 9 points seems like a lot, right up until a point where a team that is really bad at running the football in the Texans gets into a position where they have to throw it a ton over and over and over again. That's going to cause some turnovers. And I think this game stretches out to a point where, honestly, it might look a lot like the week 1 game, just maybe in a little bit of a different way, certainly not getting week 1 weather in Baltimore. So yeah, I have this being kind of like a Ravens 31-13, 14, maybe 15 type of a game. Yeah, I think this is blowout city here for the Ravens, and kind of shutting some people up here who are judging them by, honestly, a few years back type of stuff. And listen, it's, Ravens coaching staff, we're down to a point where like all coaching staffs are pretty good in this, in this divisional round. You kind of need to be. But the Ravens coaching staff is on another level here. And by the way, they've seen Bobby Slowick's offense in week 1 against the 49ers, right? Slowick obviously coming from the 49ers, and they didn't have any problem with it against the best possible version, which is the San Francisco 49ers at home. So I think they probably feel pretty good about their preparation for it this coming week.
Yeah, shout out to my guy Bobby Slowick,
Great job.
Work. I thought he did a really good job last week for sure. It'll be interesting to see how this week plays out in what should be, or what we hope can be, interesting game. As you mentioned last week, we can't really say that much for close games. Yeah, I'm on the Houston Texans here. It's just too many points for me, but all the points that you just made are obviously way more relevant and valid, and I definitely understand. We will keep it going here. We will go to another 9-point spread. San Francisco 49ers favored by 9 points against the Packers. And same spread, but I'm on the other side here. I mean, you might not be that surprised that I'm on the Niners, but the Niners have been building towards this, right? They have offensive weapons on offense and defense that are just ready to go. I can't really say that I feel like they'll be in a position that the Dallas Cowboys were last week, where they were blatantly unprepared for Jordan Love and Jordan Love's work. Niners defense is different, built different. Pass rush will make things not as comfortable for Mr. Love. And I just think on offense, the one thing I find interesting here was last week, the Packers made it a point to try to get out to an early lead and force Dallas to play from behind, and that worked. I think that game plan would be in their best interests again, because having Brock Purdy try to throw from behind is not a place San Francisco wants to be in either. But overall, as mentioned, I think it comes down to the Niners defense. Niners defense being able to slow Love and the Packers from that, all-out assault we saw last week. I think the Niners are able to do that. And if that's the case on offense, we saw the Packers defense isn't really that good. Niners should be able to take care of business here. Niners roll -9 is my call here.
Well, you can tell Shell's out there shopping. -9 is the best number available. It's a couple of cents off of 9.5 at Pinnacle right now. So that, there's not much of a difference between 9.5. The line opened 10. So you can see there was some interest in the Packers. And full disclosure, I was one of those people who was interested in the Packers at +10. 9's getting a little, I'm not going to add to my position at +9 or +9.5. So I'm going to kind of stick with my original bet. Packers +10. Shell, you had something for us?
No.
Sorry. So at +10, I was comfortable with the Packers, and here's why. A lot of times we get into this divisional round, and you get that double-digit spread because again, you come off, you have a team coming off of a bye. And by the way, they have 49ers from a rhythm, offense type situation. Like, they, to me, would qualify as a team you'd want to worry a little bit about. And listen, it's the 49ers offense, right? It kind of feels like it just runs no matter what the circumstance. But it would be the situation where, like, maybe this type of offense is a little bit, messed up by the fact that they haven't really been involved in a real football game in 3 weeks now, right? Essentially, taking off that Week 18 game pretty aggressively to the tune of Carson Wentz winning a game. So normally when you come into these games, it's like, oh yeah, this kind of like fluke team. It's the 7 seed. I don't think 7 seed had won until this past week, but in traditionally a 6 seed, right, wins, knocks off that third team. But I think that's kind of the point too, right, where the 6 seed would knock off the third best team in the conference. Now we're talking about a 7 seed who has to knock off the second best team, right? And in this case, like, that's a tier higher, right? Even if we don't think much of the Cowboys come playoff time, and obviously they continue to depress their fan base and anybody looking to back them in the playoffs, especially laying points. And they end up absolutely destroying Dallas because, like you said, Dallas wasn't ready to play in that game. I didn't agree with the Packers taking the ball, winning the coin toss, and then taking the ball first. That, like, they literally had to score a touchdown for that to work out. And sure enough, it did, right? So, I mean, yeah, if they end up sort of organically getting the ball first because San Francisco wins the coin toss, fine, I'm okay with that. But, like, you can't just give an extra possession to the opponent by taking the ball first, or sort of risking the idea of getting kind of doubled up there at the end of the first half and the start of the second half. I think, like I said, when these teams come in, it's like, oh yeah, how have they done it? Or, some sort of weather, low scoring game, or this, that, or whatever. Jordan Love's numbers since like mid-November are basically the best in the league from a quarterbacking standpoint, right? And it's like, how much are you going to just completely ignore that coming into this game, knowing that you're getting as many points as you're going to get? And you mentioned the Packers defense, and no, hasn't been good all season long, right? Probably, honestly, no matter what the situation, I imagine there might even be a coordinator change when it comes to, in Green Bay. I mean, if they win this game and somehow make the NFC Championship, maybe everybody probably stays, I suppose. But to me, it's like, this is just going to be two offenses kind of just slinging it on each other, because the 49ers' weakness, right, is in the secondary. And you've seen that kind of pop up against, I don't want to say like, they've never played any good quarterbacks here, right? Like, because they did a decent job, obviously, in the start of the season against Dak Prescott. But, the Kirk Cousinses of the world and the Joe Burrows of the world have been able to move the ball against the 49ers, secondary. And Jordan Love right now is kind of qualifying himself. Listen, second in the league this year in passing touchdowns, and obviously, the best quarterback rating since mid-November. He is quickly grasping what he's needed to grasp in the second half of this season. And along with CJ Stroud, right, like, is jumping into that kind of, that dude conversation for next year. Maybe even like an MVP, like top 10 sort of odds type situation for both of those guys next year. And it's like, do I want to fade the guy who's on the come up here, who next year is going to get attention for, those, whether it's that award or most touchdowns or most yards or anything like that, with this army of, healthy wide receivers, young, healthy wide receivers. And the guy that we talked about last week that, if you want to play back the tape, you're welcome to do so, right? Like, Aaron Jones is the difference maker on the Packers offense, right? 4 straight games now with over 110 yards, I believe it is. Like, we grabbed him 50-1 to lead the playoffs in rushing yards. He might be able to do this with just 2 games. We talked about the idea you kind of need to play 3 games. In the article, you need to play 3 games to have a chance to lead the league in these categories. But if he has 110 yards again in a losing cause, like, he may end up, that might be good enough, because 200 yards was good enough last playoffs. So you've got a really good Jordan Love, and you got a really good, healthy Aaron Jones, again, for the first time, essentially, in these last 4 weeks than you had all season long. So again, if we're judging the Packers, which their rating had been sort of below average team, very close to the Texans all season long, but there is discernible difference between that version of this team and the current version of this team now, with Matt LaFleur, who in theory was supposed to be an offensive, kind of guru-y type coach here, right? And wasn't really working with Aaron Rodgers, at the end there last year. Maybe that had something to do with Rodgers kind of wanting to do his thing more than LaFleur's thing, because I think if you watch that offense, by comparison, it's considerably different this year than it was last year, even just from a play calling structure standpoint. Because Love will do the stuff, as we talked about, honestly, before the season, that LaFleur wants to do. And whether that's going to work or not, it remained to be seen. And now it has been seen. And it took, 8, 9, 10 games. But now it is cooking. And so I think, again, I don't trust the Packers defense in the way that you sort of said there. So I think both these teams kind of score. The total certainly reflects that. We're into the 50s here from, the total perspective. I think that's probably an over in this game, but I think that also kind of keeps the Packers in this game for a really long time. So I'm content with my Packers plus 10 here. I think, in these 2 games, it's funny that you and I are kind of opposite. Not kind of, we are opposite in that, I think the blowout's coming in the first game, and I think the close game's coming in the second game. And part of that is sort of weather and circumstance, et cetera, right? When you take Houston's offense out of comfortable conditions and you put it into uncomfortable conditions, you don't have the same situation here with the Packers, right? Who are going to Santa Clara for this game. And, while that's not indoors necessarily, this is an outdoor team that has played obviously in Lambeau Field all season long, getting to play in kind of a somewhat of a warm weather climate here. I think this game is pretty close. I think the 49ers win. I bet, I made a rather large bet on the 49ers to win the Super Bowl on Monday before those games on Monday night, because I figured, what's the, worst thing that could happen is that no upsets happen and my price doesn't change. Best thing that could happen was maybe the Bills lose and the Eagles lose and the price for the 49ers gets better. We got one out of those 2 scenarios. So a price that was plus 190 is now plus 175. So don't get me wrong. I absolutely hope the 49ers win this game. I just think at 10 points was too many. If you're absolutely have to make a bet on the side here, I obviously Packers are the side for me, but honestly, if you have to make a bet on the side or the total here, I think scoring is going to be the thing here, and maybe the over is the best version of the side or total in this game. But when it comes to props, we're going to have a lot of anytime touchdowns. We're going to have a lot of overs in this game, and honestly, a game that's going to look a lot from a scoring standpoint, a lot like the game in Dallas. I don't expect it to be a scenario where it's the Packers that are up by 28 points in the game. I think that we're in for an entertaining game. And again, like I said, hopefully the Packers win by sort of a comfortable margin of, 7 points.
Yeah, this one's going to be very interesting for me for sure, because I'm interested to see Shanahan's game plan coming out of that game. As I thought it was weird that he actually said in front of the media, "Oh yeah, we started preparing for the Packers in the second quarter of the game."
Anytime you can stick it to Dallas, though, right? By rule, you have to, right?
It's like, did you have to say that though?
And you could tell, he had kind of that look on his face, like "F you, Dallas."
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
But from a just quickly on a game planning standpoint, right? I think that's kind of the one fault in the 49ers sort of conceptually. They are so talented that it may not matter. And again, like I said, from the Super Bowl bet, I hope it does not matter. But the one thing is the game plan is always the game plan, right? The offense is always the offense. It's just what sort of order of operations are you going to run the plays in?
Who are we choosing to highlight this week?
Yeah. And which sort of part of it is going to work, right? So it's kind of, they're an easy team to prepare for. They're a hard team to play against because of obviously the talent that's on the field. So just kind of a note on that, where it's you kind of know what you're going to get and you're not going to like it.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm interested to see Brock Purdy here. I think this is like you've kept CMC healthy for the majority of the season. I know there's a portion where he was banged up, but we're in the playoffs now. Just hand that man the ball. Brock Purdy, listen, you can chill, take a seat back. All that MVP stuff, we can forget about talking about all that. Your job is hand off the ball, check down passes. Maybe you have to make the odd player here once or twice where Jimmy G couldn't, and everything's good. At least that's my hope. That's my Niners fan talking there. We keep it going to Sunday's action. We got the Bucs at the Lions. Lions at home and favored by 6.5. The Eagles' issues here, I guess, are a lot deeper than most people might have been willing to admit. And obviously, we talked about it last week. We were on the Bucs just in terms of the points.
Sure.
The interesting thing about the Eagles and looking at that game last week against the Bucs was Baker, your man's Baker Mayfield. I mean, talk about having a week of headlines and just people bigging up Baker. And I even see your man's, what's a Good Morning Football guy? Kyle Brandt talking about how excited he was because he was talking up Baker when he was on the Panthers. And it's like, no, you weren't. Nobody was.
And why would you? Yeah.
Like what?
How did that go? Right. Yeah.
Like there's a reason he's not there anymore.
Right.
Right. Like what?
It's like if I said I was bigging up Randy Moss when he was on the Raiders. It's like, what? That didn't, you were wrong.
Oh, it's too funny. But anyways, a great story for the Bucs, great comeback story. Baker's obviously able to, get a playoff win, which is huge for not where we thought his career would be at this point. But I feel like heading into this round now and playing a team that might not have been turning on itself as the Eagles were to end the season, and maybe the opposite in terms of a Lions team that has rallied behind each other and rallied behind Jared Goff. I just feel like this is just two teams that, it's a weight class one for me. 6.5 points is a lot for the Lions. I don't really like laying that much with the Lions, but in this one, I'm not buying into the Bucs and what they did last week. I feel like that was more about the Eagles and their bad game plan, their bad preparation, their bad team spirit, and overall, wait, does Nick Sirianni still have a job? Haven't checked that lately, but yes, give me Detroit minus 6.5.
Right. If Mike McCarthy has a job, he might as well have a job. I mean, who cares, right? Like apparently none of this stuff matters. Yeah. That game last week, right? We talked about it, a little, obviously we talked about it on the show, but we talked about this kind of conceptually all season long, right? Is like in life, right? If people want to tell you who they are, just believe them. Right. And the Eagles told us who they were at the end of the season, right? Like this idea. And everybody's like, oh, can they flip the switch? Can they snap their fingers? Right. And it's like every sport all the time. The answer is like almost exclusively no. Right. Teams it's professional, especially in the NFL, right? Like part of the enjoyment or sort of the angle with the NFL is that you're going to get everybody's best effort every single week, or at least like that's the theory because there are so few games. So like this isn't a scenario. It's like, oh, dog days of the NHL or NBA season or Major League Baseball, where it's like, oh, you're kind of just not even really paying attention for a couple of weeks here as you get into the middle of the season. You haven't gotten to the stretch drive to fight for the playoffs. You haven't even gotten to the All-Star break in those two respective sports. The NFL, it's not like that, right? Like they're trying, you literally have to try your hardest or you're going to get killed out there. So if that was the Eagles' hardest, at the end of the regular season, if that's the best that they could do, like the idea that they were going to be somehow better than that at the start of the playoffs, it's different than from Dallas. Dallas is just like, okay, every playoffs, it's just going to be the same. Now, listen, some of you can make the case, and maybe this is McCarthy's case. Hey, we lost to the 49ers in these previous two playoffs, and we played them pretty close in both games. This isn't like we always no-show a playoff game. It just kind of happened at the worst possible time for McCarthy, right? It's just, I think the thing is there's kind of too many good coaches available to just sort of run it back with McCarthy again. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit different than the Eagles. The Eagles just flat out like quit. And, how do you what's the recipe for a blowout, especially again, with teams that were lined pretty similarly? One team just not showing up, right? This wasn't some amazing performance by the Buccaneers. They couldn't even catch the football in the first half, right? Like that's
Mike Evans.
The Mike Evans, again, like I call him he's probably going to Hall of Fame, and I don't even think he's a good football player, right? Because it's like you have the size, you have the speed, And it's just like, yeah, but you just drop the ball like once a game, and it's always like in the worst possible moment, right? And so he's probably going to have a monster game against the Lions secondary. So like, don't get me wrong, like I'm almost definitely taking the over on Mike Evans' yardage this week, as spoiler alert here. But it's funny, like, you remember the Steve Young when he wins the Super Bowl thing, right? Like, they get the monkey off my back clip after he quote unquote finally wins the Super Bowl. And I think he was like the 49ers quarterback for like 3 years at that time, right? Like the idea that, it had been like a decade or something. So, it wasn't a John Elway situation. But it's funny that never kind of like became a thing. Maybe it was sort of, mid 90s. It was too early for it to be a thing that people do. But like, you wouldn't blame the Lions if everybody wasn't just like fake ripping monkeys off each other's backs in the after that game, because that felt like a massive exhale, because you can come into that game and know that the crowd is going to be bananas, which they were for the first half of that game, and know that you're going to have that sort of energy advantage in the first half. But like, when you're sitting on history, right, this idea, we haven't won a playoff game in 33 years or whatever, it's like, that's an amount of pressure on one's shoulders that can be like really overwhelming. And you see a lot of these teams this weekend put up these dud performances. Like, it's pretty impressive that they're able to kind of hang on as long as they did. And you can kind of see, at least sort of, and maybe this is sort of a narrative that I'm putting on it, but like the second half of that game, like they were dying to blow that game.
Oh yeah.
Not from like a massive mistake element, but it was kind of like they had, I don't want to be crass about this, but they had kind of like, blown it a little bit in the first half, and, didn't have their sea legs necessarily in the second half. And it was just kind of like, all right, let's hang on here for dear life. I think having that sort of off of their shoulders here is massive for this coming week, where they can kind of at least now, I don't want to say enjoy it or whatever, but just sort of accept the like role of like, all right, now that that's kind of done, we are theoretically a legit team here now. We have, sort of put all that stuff, the past is the past now, and we can play a good game for 60 minutes. Whereas the Buccaneers don't really do that. They don't really play. And you know what I mean? And like, they had the lead after that first half, but again, that wasn't a crisp performance necessarily. It was more just like, oh wait, David Moore is scampering through the Eagles secondary. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, second half. What's the other guy did it? The other young kid did it. He's running through, like nobody's able to tackle him, right? Where you're like, it's a 5-yard out that turns into like a 70-yard touchdown. You're just like,
whatever the opposite of shout out is.
Yeah.
Shout out to Bradbury.
Yeah. Right. And it's just like, man, this team, like, they just aren't, this isn't it. Like, that's not going to work for the Buccaneers. And, we talked
about the Lions were literally out here like injuring dudes across the middle.
Right. It was like this and I thought everything was pretty legal. Like, we can argue about like the Stafford hit, but it was like, the first hit him in the chest, and the other guy was sort of forced into and whatever, and didn't hit him like in the head necessarily. And then he hit his head on the ground. And like the Higbee thing, I think Collinsworth made the good point, right? It's like, that's the hit that the receivers would like to get ruled out of the game, but you can't, it's either head or low side. You can't, take out both, or if they did, God help us. And, and so it's like, wow, the Lions were out for blood, in that game. And so that intensity level, especially defensively, I thought was really impressive. And so while the defense for the Lions is, the weakness in its entirety, speaking of this being a rematch, this is the one rematch where like the other one was a road victory, right? The Lions won that game. I shouldn't say the other one. The Bills won on the road in Kansas City, but like a road blowout victory, where that game wasn't, all that close. And so I just don't know what's necessarily going to change here for the Buccaneers, because I think, again, predictably, fortunately for us last week, they were able to take advantage of an Eagles team that's absolutely kind of toast. The Lions are the opposite of that. And again, you're going from home to road, right? So again, there's so many things that are going to change for the Buccaneers for this game in a negative way. And there's so many things that will change for the Lions in a positive way, right? You're not dealing with Matthew Stafford, who, like, anytime anybody mentions like the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, like, it's amazing how we all forget about Matthew Stafford, despite him literally winning a Super Bowl like 2 years ago. Yeah. So yeah, everything's kind of getting worse here, getting more, difficult for the Buccaneers. And honestly, I think a lot is going to get a lot easier for the Lions, with maybe the exception of, run offense, because I think the Buccaneers can do a decent job stopping the run. But Jared Goff's playing well enough that I don't know that that's going to necessarily matter. Worth mentioning, we haven't talked about the sort of, well, we did, I guess we did talk about the line move in Green Bay, San Francisco, going from 10 down to 9.5. But, the Baltimore line has stayed pretty, steady. It opened -8.5 and has gotten bet up to 9.5, as high as 9.5. I think a lot of that has had to do with the idea that the teaser leg going from an 8.5 to 2.5 was, listen, I jumped right on a Ravens -2.5 teaser. I'll tell you that right now. This game has gone from 5.5, like on open for maybe 15 minutes on Sunday night, to immediately 6, and then to 6.5, right? So like this line is going up, up, up. Once it gets to 7, you get into a sort of a tricky spot when it comes to like which side you'd rather be on in a playoff game with a pretty relatively poor Lions defense. But anything under 7, like for me, has always been a bet, and I was happy to get -5.5 at -115 as part of that initial open. Got as much as I could out of that, and that's probably good enough for me. But I can't really make a salient case here for the Bucs to keep this game close, because I think the Lions are sitting on probably a really, really good performance, whereas last week it was kind of like, all right, let's survive the scenario and the pressure, and honestly a really good Rams team on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, Matthew Stafford, you mentioned it. Like, that's a hostile environment to play in the playoffs on the road, and they were right there. Right.
Yeah,
like, it's not for stalling in the red zone a couple times. Like, they're right there, still had a chance to win at the end. That was a really, really high level road performance there by the Rams there last week. The Bucs, it's like they've already won. Right.
Yeah.
They've already won. If they get blown out in this game, it's not like they're going home being like, what a terrible season. Like, made the playoffs, won a game, Baker's signing a contract. Cool.
And that's what's our, 4 years of doing this podcast, and Baker being, prominent in our lives for, 3.5 of those. Cause I think there was 1/2 of a season or even a third of a season where he wasn't a starting quarterback. You want Baker when he's got a chip on his shoulder, right? Yeah. You don't want Baker when things are going well. And this is a consideration of things are going well, right? Like things are going well for the Buccaneers, and it's about to not be. So I think, listen, I've always been sort of a defender of Baker. The reason we kind of complain about Baker is because, we probably bet on Baker maybe more times than we probably should have necessarily. I think he got a raw deal in Cleveland. Like, they sort of forced him to play injured, and he looked bad while doing it. And guess what? A lot of people are going to look bad doing it. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks who aren't willing to play while injured, including the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns that got paid $200 to $300 million, right? And so, like, I give Baker some credit for that. I think everything that, he goes to Carolina, and it's like, I'm sorry, what about the Carolina organization? Means that I should be blaming Baker for anything that happened there, right? And so as much as we make, fun of the idea of like, Kyle Brandt liking, him in Carolina, that has more to do with Carolina than it does for me with Baker. And he plays a style where he's going to get hurt a lot, and that's sort of, problematic, because he's also going to keep playing hurt in these games. And so, he's probably pretty hurt still for this game. And, again, that's only going to work, a few times against certain opponents, especially if one of those opponents is, in NBA parlance, 1, 2, 3 Cancooning it harder than I will be after this week.
Yes, after this next week. Sure. For sure. I gotcha. Lions -6.5 here. And as we switch to the last game of the weekend, I find it interesting because I write down the lines literally 15 minutes before we did this podcast, right? Mm-hmm. As I go back to the exact same place that I saw said lines, I notice that those lines are now 9.5 in the Niners and Ravens game. And this one is 2.5. But when I wrote this down, it was 3. And I'm talking obviously about the Buffalo Bills at home to the Kansas City Chiefs. And, I'm on Kansas City in this one. We'll start there first off. And I know you're not surprised by that, as nobody listening to this pod would be surprised by that.
Right.
But we're coming into this game, and it's weird to even just say Mahomes playing on the road in the playoffs for the first time in his career. Just seems weird, because we've watched a lot of Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs in his quote unquote young career. Yeah. But in this one, you have the Kansas City Chiefs going into Buffalo. And I just think anytime I'm getting points with Mahomes, I'm still going to be in that realm. Now you're also telling me the Bills are banged up, as we saw their defense come into last week's game against Pittsburgh already banged up, and then you just continuously saw more defensive guys walk off the field, go into the locker room. It's a tough one. I know the line or the scoreboard looked like Buffalo beat up on the Steelers last week, but it really wasn't that much of a blowout if you watch that game. And you're going from Mason Rudolph here to, again, Patrick Mahomes and company.
Yeah.
And not that they've solved their wide receiver issues, but I think last week's game against the Dolphins, you at least saw, okay, well, these are the guys that I trust, right?
Yeah.
It's Rice, it's Kelsey, who is still dropping balls, and it's Pacheco. So at least we know that much. And with that all in tow, and I'm getting 3 points, I'm on Kansas City here, just because I feel like Buffalo's too banged up. And this is almost like in a different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like the Bucs, I feel like the Bills won. Like, I know that if they lose in this game and they lose to the Chiefs again and whatever,
yeah,
like where their season was in the 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, to the run that they've been on to get here and host 2 playoff games, won the division still, all that stuff, and you're banged up, as mentioned. I feel like the Bills, you've had a good season here.
Yeah.
You've had a good season. But my last thing I'll say, because I've rambled for too long here, the main reason I'm picking the Chiefs is not actually Mahomes. It's the Chiefs defense. I just think their defense against Josh Allen here, that will be the biggest difference maker, the biggest differentiator here, as the Chiefs defense still doesn't get talked about nearly as much as it should. And that's just because Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey and Taylor Swift are on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, where's Tay-Tay going to stay this weekend? Is he going to stay locally here in Toronto and limo it to Buffalo, to Orchard Park? Like, I don't know. Are there many hotels that are, to Taylor Swift's liking in Western New York? I don't know.
The PJ just flies in morning of, no?
Oh, I guess that's probably true.
Can you do that? Can you do that in Buffalo? I assume you can, right?
I don't know if you don't want to rely on air
buff.
Yeah, I was gonna say air traffic, but that doesn't make any sense. Air transportation, I guess. Air travel. Okay, football talk. Yeah, so from a market betting perspective, right? Like, this is, you get what you pay for here. So if you like the Bills -2.5, I see the best odds for you are -115, right? If you like the Chiefs at +3, as you said you have, I see like -120 is probably what you have to pay for, right? So there is this like tiniest lean in favor of the -2.5 from a pricing standpoint. So if you broke it down, this would be essentially -2.7. All right, it's not exactly -2.75. It's a -2.7 line. I'm with you on the Chiefs here for all the reasons that you mentioned, right? And you talk about the Steelers game and like, Mason Rudolph certainly not lighting it up, but like, didn't it kind of feel like it was like, man, it kind of looks like Mason Rudolph's like good a little, right? And it's like, oh no, but I know better than that. Yeah. And so it's more just, and of course you see, you have the information of the Bills like losing guys in their secondary, losing guys on their defense, and just be, those injuries piling up, and just being like, yeah, okay, like I see why Mason Rudolph looks okay, right? Like they probably should have covered that game. Listen, if Minkah Fitzpatrick can tackle, they probably cover that game because they probably maybe force a field goal and the Bills would have been content to go up 10 with 4 minutes left or 3 minutes left. And when the Steelers drove down into field goal range, instead of being down 14, they'd been down 10 and would have been content with kicking a Boswell field goal to get, the onside kick opportunity, and still being down just one possession, right? So if you kind of play it out that way, like they were essentially one tackle away from covering. You could also make the case, they don't throw the interception, which is, kind of a look what I found type interception there by the Bills, where the ball just kind of ends up, guy turns and the ball's in his hands. They don't throw that interception in the first half, and even settle for a field goal there. Maybe we get a Steelers cover. So, when you talk about the Bills here, it's like, I don't know that was all that impressive, which I think is why we're never going to get 3 flat. And I am waiting for 3 flat or 3 even -115, because I know that, it's probably not going to drop down to -2, because I think there's an appetite enough out there for the Bills that the line is going to kind of keep sort of balanced here. So if and when I get an opportunity, when I come across a Chiefs +3 at -115 at a place that I'm allowed to bet, I will jump on that. You mentioned the defense, right? And again, with the Bills, it's like against the Steelers, which everybody sort of thought thinks their defense is good because they have TJ Watt and whatnot. Of course, they don't have him for that game, and the Bills didn't really take advantage of that as much as I would have liked to sort of see from them to be interested in betting the Bills in this game. And after the Chiefs kind of manhandle the Dolphins in that game, you go, okay, man, there's going to be a lot of interest in the Chiefs. Like, this is a tough circumstance from a weather perspective, not necessarily a tough opponent, because the Dolphins were far more affected by the weather. It's kind of one of those, this is why every year, we talk about the idea of that line being inflated because of the weather. It's like, this is why, because next year when this happens, we're all going to remember the Chiefs Dolphins game and, and be like, yeah, because the cold weather team is going to perform better in cold weather. Like, duh. But again, if there's cold weather this weekend, which again, it's Buffalo, it's January, it's maybe not necessarily the deep freeze or the mega snow that we got last week. The Chiefs have already done this, right? They have experienced this. So like that puts them on a more level playing field, right? So it's kind of another reason to like the Chiefs. And then, of course, you mentioned defensively, right? It's like, is Josh Allen going to run for a 60-yard touchdown in this game? Like, I doubt it. Stephon Diggs, like still, like for a guy who is sort of held in this high regard, he still doesn't really get it done in the playoffs, right? Speaking of guys whose numbers are pretty poor in the playoffs, I think he's under 60 yards on average in the playoffs, and not all of those situations were in cold weather. So it's like, all right, by the way, the Bills played a really clean game on Monday, right? On Monday afternoon. Like, there wasn't a ton of interception, fumble, like Josh Allen, what are you doing? Like this, that, or whatever. And they still couldn't really sort of separate in a meaningful way against the Steelers. So it's like, okay, is the clean game, are we getting back-to-back clean games from Buffalo? Or are we just going to be in the scenario again where Josh Allen, something happens? It doesn't feel in a way, or at least for me, that Josh Allen does these things. These things sort of happen to Josh Allen, right? And it's maybe because he is so talented and physically gifted that like anytime anything goes wrong, it's like, it's a circumstance that just sort of happens to him that he is responsible for. Don't get me wrong, but it isn't like something that he does necessarily. And it's just like when it kind of feels that way, when it feels a little out of his control in a lot of ways, like that can be almost more scary than when it kind of is in your control, where it's like, it isn't like dumb throw. It's more just like, oh, that sort of thing happened where like he was throwing it away, but the ball like didn't quite get out of bounds or this, that, or whatever. And like, that's just not going to work against the Chiefs. And like the Chiefs have struggled all season long, but it's funny, the thing with the Chiefs and the thing that we don't like about the Chiefs, their offense, weird sentence to say, like the dudes don't catch the ball, and they had to, of course, throw a long one to MBS on Saturday, and of course it didn't come remotely close to him. Whether that's the weather, Mahomes, or MBS, like we're not going to blame Valdez-Scantling for that. But like it is funny that they tried. They're like, oh, maybe we'll get him a catch. It's like, no, you're not. A long catch. But it is funny. It's like their literal job is to catch the ball. And the thing that we don't like about the Chiefs offense is that those guys don't catch the ball. And it's just like, maybe next time they do. Because it's like, again, it's their job. It's what they practice. It's like, again, it's not happening to them. They are doing it on their, of their own sort of volition, right? And it's like one day it's Tony, and then it's like all of a sudden Mecole Hardman is prominently involved, like running around. Yeah. None of these are actually good receivers. Like we know this. They're just super fast guys who are designed to sort of stretch the defense and open it up for the Rashee Rices and the Travis Kelce's. And like Travis Kelce, right? He's dropping passes too, and he has had a bad season. And then you look up, and because I think it's because we think of Mahomes, and he's still quote unquote young, and like you said, in his sort of young career, and that Kelce has sort of been attached to the hip with him. But then you look up and you realize that Travis Kelce's 34 years old. And you just kind of go like, whoa, when did that happen? Because like if you had given me sort of the over under on 33 and a half, 32 and a half, 31 and a half, I'd probably take the under. But you forget that there were so many years in the Alex Smith era, if you will, that's like you kind of forget that like, no, Kelce was pretty established before Mahomes even got there, and he's 34 years old, and he's not playing quarterback where you can kind of stretch it into your late 30s. Like he's playing tight end, and listen, Kelce doesn't do a ton of blocking necessarily, but like the miles that he has had over his career where he's catching balls over the middle and getting, there's not a ton of catch the ball and run out of bounds for Travis Kelce, right? There's a lot. It's contact on every single play, whether or not he gets the ball, or not. So, it's like, okay, I guess we're still like relying on a 34-year-old tight end who, again, has shown us, people tell you who they are, believe them, has shown us that he's not, what he used to be. And you look at that box score and it's like Rice and Kelsey, and like, that's it. Like, that can be a really scary thing on the road, because you expect like in the NBA and in the NHL, you expect the support players to play better at home. And that hasn't been the case. So like, if it's going to get done, it's going to be done on the shoulders of those guys. And can they do that? And I think it's the respect of Patrick Mahomes that makes me think like, yeah, they probably can. But like you said, to me, it's honestly more about the defense and being able to turn over Josh Allen and being able to, take advantage of the things that happened to Josh Allen here. So, I don't think it's particularly some sort of sharp play. I think a lot of people are going to talk you in, try to talk you into the Bills this weekend as being kind of the quote unquote sharp side. Because like you said, I think a lot of the public, if you will, is going to be on the Chiefs. I got to side with that side, man. Like, you give me a couple of points again, especially the point is like, if you can get 3 and pay, honestly, if push comes to shove, anything better than minus 120, I think 3 is obviously the key, the key enough number here, because all of these other games that these teams have played, if you had +3 in your pocket, it didn't necessarily win every time, but you probably felt really, really good about it in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say here about the Chiefs too, like Pacheco might not be the best running back in the league, but he is just playoff football.
He's a playoff dude, man. Yeah. Just the way that he runs. And like the Bills run defense, I didn't mention it, right? But like, yeah, they got Dayton Jones back. Like the run defense still isn't particularly great.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, again, it's funny because it's like Patrick Mahomes going on the road, but like the thing you like about a road team in the playoffs, and again, this is why I don't particularly like the Texans, is run game and defense.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what the Chiefs are bringing to this table in a way that they haven't in years past. So while the Bills were probably, it would have been advantageous for the Bills to be at home last year, the year before, all these other matchups that they've had to go to KC. The irony in all of this is like, this version of the Chiefs is like built to win on the road. It's like they knew that eventually they were going to have to go on the road. Mm-hmm. And honestly, like people go, the offense hasn't been the same without Tyreek Hill, but like the reason they had to get rid of Tyreek Hill, the reason they get rid of is not the right word, but like the reason they had to trade Tyreek Hill is to open up money for not just Patrick Mahomes, but defense and depth. And that's what they've built. And that's what's going to allow them to win this game if they do.
Yeah, super interesting stuff. Hopefully we get another great game between these two teams to wrap up another good weekend of football. But between now and then, as we've mentioned, the lines are fluid and keep on moving. Where can the people find you online to get all the information and education they so crave?
Yeah, the Twitter handle is @MRussAuthentic. And of course, everything I write's over at The Score in the Bet tab. Everybody's got the Score app on your phone. Just go to news and over to the Bet tab. It's on the furthest left side here. We had 8 articles last week, 6 game previews, a player prop article for the player futures prop, right? Most rushing yards, receiving yards, et cetera, et cetera. And we had an anytime touchdown that didn't parlay that didn't necessarily go well, but we almost ended up winning the mega long shot anytime touchdown. That's how well the long shot TDs went last weekend. Unfortunately, there's only 4 games, so you can't really do an anytime touchdown round robin in the way that we like, because we need 5 games for that. At least you guys know how to do it if you want to do one for 4 touchdown scorers this week. So we only have 4 articles this week, which makes life easier for me as it's half the work. That being said, I get to put in twice the amount into those articles. So look for those Thursday and Friday for the games on Saturday and Sunday.
Sounds good, my dude. And you can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter @ShellAlexander, and on Instagram @Sheldon Alexander. Of course, lots going on there in Raptorland if you are following those accounts. So if you're there just purely looking for football, I apologize, but it's busy season going on right now in Raptorland. But thanks to all the people liking and subscribing and following along with the pod as we push through the playoffs, as it's a divisional round. This is the best time of year in the NFL as we're heating up, and in theory, we're getting the best teams playing each other. What more do you want from the NFL season? So thank y'all for rocking with us and tuning in each and every week. And as I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the Clutch Picks Sports Betting Podcast coming to you each and every week. Make sure you like and subscribe on all of the accounts. And as always, the pod is unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.